Welcome to the Matt Largent Concert. Because if you're going to screw it up with style. You've got to serve and serve first, and then you have to make that conscious decision to leave.
Oh, if you have any problems, dial information. Thank you for calling. Thank you for calling.
Welcome back to the Matt Largent Concert. I'm especially excited about today's episode. We have a fantastic guest joining us. Our first guest in probably 2 seasons. And I'd like to say it was because of COVID. No, it was just because I like to scream into the universe. Amy Armstrong is joining us, who has pioneered some innovative conflict resolution. She's the co-founder of the Center for Family Resolution in Columbus, Ohio. And even though I'm an Oklahoma State fan, and she's in Ohio, we're still going to believe that we can get along and have, we won't have any conflict here. So it'll be good. Amy is a specialist in de-escalating high stakes conflicts, whether it's family law, public schools, and she's going to share with us some powerful strategies, including her signature voice boundary blueprint. Amy, it's great to have you on the show with me.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you so much for inviting me on. I know everybody listening has conflict in their lives as long as our heart's beating. So It comes with the territory of being human.
Well, it's so interesting because Amy and I were having some conversation before, and I just taught some crucial discussions, and it's such a challenging subject. And that was such. I'm kind of off on the, I sent her a script and I said, hey, it's going to go any which way you want because I just scream at the universe. But we were talking about conflict and how it's anytime emotions are invested. And so unless we're robots, we're going to have conflict.
And exactly. And it shows we care and we want to care. And so my work, and I know your work too, is like, how do we care without driving ourselves crazy? Right? Yeah.
Without feeling those negative feelings like we're being taken advantage of or that, I mean, so much that goes into it.
Exactly.
And one of the things we've been discussing, so in this season, we've been focusing on leadership and the ups and the downs of leadership. And especially the last couple of episodes, we've been talking about values and how they shape organizations and how they reduce burnout and create good work environments. And I know that a lot of your work revolves around setting those strong boundaries and resolving conflicts in ways that align with core values. So how do you see values playing a role in the way that we approach conflict?
Great question. 2 ways. My primary values are responsibility and equality. So I really like to take responsibility for my thoughts, feelings, and actions. And I want everybody else in my world to take responsibility for their thoughts, feelings, and actions. And so often conflict is created when we get into each other's business and we try to take responsibility for someone else's thoughts, feelings, and actions. So, Matt, I really hold responsibility very high on my list of values. And I also include equality. I believe everyone gets to have thoughts, feelings, and actions that they can own and take responsibility for. And so often we get into these power imbalances that keep people from being able to speak up about what's important to them. And so a lot of what's in my boundary work is how do we be so responsible for our own stuff without undermining the voice of someone else?
Yeah. Now, I think that is where, because intent, we talk a lot about intent and action. Intent is only a small part of what our values are. Our action makes up so much. So we may think, hey, I'm doing a great job of respecting boundaries or being respectful to somebody else's voice, but our actions may say something totally different.
Exactly.
So how do you show somebody, hey, your intent is this, but your action was saying this?
Right. So we actually don't talk to the other person about their behavior as much as we talk about the impact that their behavior had on us. So this is work that came out of psychology in the 70s around I statements and just really being clear about what's going on for you rather than telling the other person what their actions should be. Because, Matt, I don't know about you, but most people don't like to be told what to do.
Mhm.
And it interferes with our value of autonomy. We like to be in charge of our own person. And so when people sense that the other person is correcting them or criticizing them, or even worse, demonizing them in some way, there's no way we're going to have a productive, equal conversation. But if we can learn to talk about impact and set boundaries that reflect our experience, then we can get out of the business of trying to direct and control everybody else. Even for a leader who has an underachieving employee, we talk about choices. We talk about what that leader's going to do given X, Y, and Z happening with that employee, rather than making it sound like a correction or a criticism of the employee.
Well, let's explore some of this because I
Mhm.
was really intrigued whenever we were able to communicate via email, and you started talking about voice boundary blueprint, and you
Right.
started sharing with me just kind of you just gave me such a little taste. And the
Mhm.
funny thing is that so I was kind of like interested. I started kind of looking up some, and I looked up absolutely the wrong thing.
That's
so
okay. That's
so
okay. Let me run through it.
yes, please share
Yeah.
with us.
So one of the first things we can do is the hardest, and that's the V in voice, and that's create a vision. In other words, why are we having this conversation? Because so often when we ask ourselves that question, we might decide we're actually not interested in investing any time in especially if it's a heated conversation that doesn't really mean a whole lot to us. So we want to have a vision of where we want to end up. So when I'm having a discussion about politics, for example, with my neighbor, what's my point of having that? Am I trying to persuade my neighbor? If so, that's one type of conversation. If I'm just trying to connect and show the neighbor that I'm a friendly, easygoing neighbor, I'm going to have a very different kind of conversation. So we want to know what our purpose is, and I call that the vision. The V is for the vision.
Okay.
And then we get into the O in voice, which is our options. And that is where we can really show responsibility, Matt, for looking at any situation with multiple creative possible outcomes. And so when we go into a conversation without being dead set on exactly how it has to go, we can have a little bit of fun with it, right? And watch it go, see how it unfolds.
Okay.
And then the I comes from a saying I bet your listeners are familiar with. It's the I is for influence. And we know we can't control everything. And we want to look at, where do I really have influence in this situation versus where don't I have any control over it, so that we can be sure and direct our energy in the places that we truly have influence. Should I keep going? Two more letters?
Let's dive into these. I want to dive into these
These
three just
three?
a little
Yeah,
bit deeper
sure.
because
There's a lot to it.
I love the fact that, and let me put this in a question first. You started with vision, you go to options, you go to influence. Is it in that order? Do you want to start out with, hey, where do I want this to go? Where's the ultimate goal? What am I trying to get out of this?
I think starting with the end in mind, the way Stephen Covey put it out there for us years ago, is a great idea. We always want to know, how do we want to feel at the end of this conversation, right? Because once we're clear on where we want to go, it's so much easier to find our way there. So
Right.
definitely start with the V for vision. But I think the others, the influence and the options, those are general mindsets that we always want to have going on in our mind all the time, is to stay creative and to be picking up on where we can make a difference and where we can't. Because if we're not going to have any influence, I don't know about you, but I like being really efficient with my time. You know,
Sure.
I like to choose not to invest in something where it's really not going to make an impact. But those are really good to just have in mind all the time, is just that noticing, hey, am I able to explore some creative options here? And what am I noticing, right? Where there's some energy and some actual hope of having an impact.
Yeah, no,
Great
absolutely.
question.
I love, because I love the, you hear that, start with the end in
Yeah.
mind. And then options to me, and this is how it reflected in my head. So you're going to have to tell me
Mhm.
if I've got my head wrapped around this, because
Sure.
I always look at it as I go in expecting the best possible outcomes, expecting the and hoping for the best possible outcomes, but I'm always prepared. What I like to call my plan, my backup for my backup, my backup for my backup,
Love it.
um, because I want to have those options of, if the conversation goes
Yeah.
this way, if it goes, I need to be flexible in that visit. I need to be
Beautiful.
flexible. So is that kind of where you're going with that options?
That's it. Exactly. Exactly. And we just don't want to enter conversations where we are creating an ultimatum that it has to go a certain way or we're out. So one of the groups where I work is the New York City Public Schools. And when I'm working with a group of teachers, let's say high school teachers, and we're talking about de-escalation strategies in their classroom, when they go to connect with one of their students who they can tell is getting aggravated, maybe that student is really irritable and they're starting to be disruptive, I want that teacher to be really clear. We don't want that student to feel worse. We certainly don't want the situation to get worse. We want to connect in a way that lets that student know, hey, I see you and I'm going to help you figure this out. Not you're a problem and you're ruining my day. Right. So we just want to get clear that I want to be here to help. If and I would hope that any high school teacher, especially in a urban area, would know you're going to run into a lot of conflict. Let's be sure and have that attitude of helpfulness. And then we can see, is this a student that just needs to be escorted out of the classroom? Or is there more I can do? Can I have more influence on that behavior right now, just with a few words of encouragement for that student?
Well, I think that that really speaks to the reality, and that sometimes
Mhm.
we have to understand the best possible situation is that maybe they need to go or I need to go. But
Some kids just need to hear, excuse me, young man, I'm not going to let you hurt yourself. So we're going to go over here. We're
yeah,
just going to, we're definitely stating boundaries, but we're just doing it in a very crisp, clean way without any criticism or even, obviously no, they don't need any lectures at that point.
right.
Yeah.
No, that's a good way for people to get in a zone
No.
out and get defensive.
Well, the part about boundaries that I think people really cling to, Matt, is this C in voice, because that is, what can you commit to? So many times, excuse me, but we're mouthy. Can I use that word? We just get so
Mhm.
mouthy and we can't stand behind what we're saying. So the saying I have is that we need to look at what we're willing and able to do. Instead of what's wrong with you, it's what am I willing and able to do? I call that being pro me, not anti you. So, for example, if somebody's telling you, you owe me $100, you got to pay up, or, it's like, well, I'd be willing to give you 50, right?
Yeah,
So you just say what you're willing to do, not what's wrong with that other person. Right. So I had a employee just this morning. We moved in my office and I was asking her to go get some things for the office. And I could tell she was really not grooving on what I was saying. And I said, what's the matter? And she said, well, I'm worried about the money. And I said, oh, okay. So instead of just saying, hey, I'd be willing to pay $30 for these supplies, she was just shut down. She's maybe a bit of an avoider.
sure.
And I said, no worries. Let's come up with a budget and here's how much I can pay and how much are you willing to pay? And I was able to help her with that conversation. But it's just people, when something's wrong, we have a style of conflict. We might challenge, we might avoid, we might be a people pleaser and say yes to something that we don't even mean. Or maybe we're great at partnering and we can just talk about, hey, here's what I need, and ask what you need. But we all have a style, and we want to make sure that we're sticking to boundaries that we can commit to. So we tell people what we're willing and able to do, right? So somebody's demanding that I call them back right now. I might say, I'm happy to call you Monday between 3 and 5, right? I can say that in a perfectly warm, friendly voice. There's nothing harsh needed that would cause an argument with that person.
So we're really talking about owning our part of the relationship, whatever that
1000%.
relationship happens to
That's
be.
that value of responsibility. Just talk about yourself.
Yes. Yeah. I can't commit to what you're going to do, but I can give you a commitment to what I'm willing to do.
Here's what I'm willing and able to do. Yeah. Yeah.
All right. So we've created a vision. We've kind of given that multiple outcomes. We're ready. We're avoiding ultimatums.
Yep.
We're trying to see what kind of influence we can kind of give onto others. We're committing to what we're able to do. Give me the E. I'm ready.
I love measurement. I like to have clear measures of success. Okay. To me, the E is our measurement of success. Does that boundary, does this interaction help you feel empowered, strong, clear, confident? That's our measure. So the E is to do that check-in and see, are you excited about this? Do you feel empowered? If not, keep going. Try something different, right? Try another option. But we want that E in there to make sure that using our voice leaves us feeling empowered. And if we're interacting with someone, we don't like the vibe we're getting from them, they're not being respectful to us, it is so fine to say, I think I'm going to end it here. Yeah. And be true to ourselves and take responsibility for your own experience and be really clear. I'm not going to repeat myself. I'm not going to go over this again. I'm ready to end this conversation. So that E has got to leave us feeling a sense of truth, that we have spoken our truth, that we're absolutely willing to stand behind what we're saying, and we're not getting into anybody else's business about what's wrong with them.
Yeah. Well, and again, we don't know. The hardest thing that I think people have to realize is that I don't know what people are going through. I don't know. We're all a subject of our own backgrounds, our own history, our own lives. And so, I mean, just you talk about the fact you're in Ohio, I'm in Oklahoma. You were raised, I don't know if you're a native Ohioan.
I am. Never been to Oklahoma. Yeah.
Is Ohioan a word? Did I just make that up? Okay. All right. Just wanted to make sure. Sometimes I make up words and it works well when it's just
got
me.
It. Yeah, you got it. Yeah. So one quick tip that I know you're going to love is just start sentences with my perspective. Oh, my perspective from growing up in Oklahoma is this. Or even ask, hey, what's your perspective as an Ohioan on this? And so it just reminds both you and the person to whom you're speaking that we're talking about perspectives here. We're not owning that I'm the only person that owns universal truths, right? Yeah. I'm just talking about me. It's just my lens, what I know, what I believe, what I experience. And the more we can own it, then we can say, well, I'm really afraid this will happen if this person gets elected. And somebody else can say, oh, well, from my perspective, I'm really worried about this happening if that other person gets elected. And so it allows us to really take responsibility that we're only speaking from our perspective. It's all we've got ever. And we're honoring the fact that that person may or may not have a different perspective.
Yeah. It's so interesting to me when you deal with people who have these, even people with very same backgrounds and very similar, close family members. I have 3 sisters, 2 brothers, but we are all incredibly different, even as young children. I think that it's not just the summation of your experiences and where you are, but the makeup of you as a human being and your mind and in the way that you were created is incredibly powerful.
And people are fascinating if we can just step back enough to not take it personally when we have a
Mhm.
disagreement and be like, what? Just be intrigued. Like, I'd love to understand how you came up with that idea, you know?
If we listen to people with genuine interest
Yeah.
and mutual
Yeah.
respect, it changes conversations.
It can
It,
be very fascinating. Yeah. Yeah.
I love that. I love the voice approach. I think it is incredibly constructive. It's a great way to handle those very tough conversations. And I
Mhm.
know that there's a lot of challenges in handling those, and takes a lot of practice to get comfortable with those.
We have to get really good at calming ourselves down when we do take something personally, and we can, you know, that feeling in your body when you're starting to get defensive and you're not having fun anymore. We've
Mm.
got to get good at noticing that, move around a little bit, take a sip of water, take a breath, maybe even say, okay, we've done a lot of good work here. Let's take a 15-minute break and come back again, or we can do some more tomorrow, or hey, how about we resume on Friday after work? So we don't have to just push and push and push through those feelings of defensiveness. We've got to
Yeah.
notice it and make sure that we go back to that vision. Nobody's trying to create a heart attack here.
Mhm.
We're trying to create positive change. No one's listening to this show that is not interested in positive change. We all want things to be better. And
Yeah.
so we want to own that as part of our vision. And our version of better might be different from someone else's version of better.
Well, and I think that boundaries, it's not about, hey, you need to stay this far away. You need to
Mm-mm,
move away. It's not about pushing
mm-mm.
people away. We're creating a space where both of us can thrive in.
And if we don't, for example, Matt, I've had lots of clients, hundreds of clients that have experienced domestic violence.
Yeah.
And so, even with those cases, I help the folks, whether it's the woman or the man, create the boundaries they need to feel safe. For example, one person's insisting on having the other conversation. The other person might say, I'll be glad to talk to you with Amy present, or I'll be glad to talk to you through email. Or I had one lady say, I'm willing to read an email from you between 5 and 7 on Wednesdays. You know, and it was just, we can set that boundary. We don't need to go off on the other person. But I am talking about really high stakes, intense situations. This applies to every situation where we can take responsibility for what we are willing and able to do to keep ourselves safe and to fulfill the vision that is important to us.
I mean, I'm going to go off script again another time because
I love
I
it.
feel like you've shared some great stories of how the voice blueprint, and you've not just used it to help others, but have used it yourself,
Oh, yeah.
in your own
Mhm.
situations and scenarios. Let me ask you, I'm going to go off a little bit for a
Sure.
minute. I know we're running short on time, but I think it's important. Um, where do you see the biggest challenge when you're coaching, as a
Mhm.
professional coach, as a professional conflict resolution specialist? This is what you do. So what is the biggest challenge that you see when working with people?
I'm going to stick with one really big challenge. So, our brain does not like uncertainty. And what our brain does with uncertainty is we find someone to blame so that we have a story that is easier for our brain to digest. So, if we can learn, really, nobody makes you feel the way you feel. You're responsible. If we can learn not to blame, this world will be a much better place.
And I think self-blame has got to take an
Oh,
equal amount to this.
exactly. Self-compassion is the answer where we just can really notice something that is causing us to feel a loss or grief or out of control. Oh my gosh, that feeling when you feel helpless or powerless or so frustrated. Yes, if we can just bathe in self-compassion in that moment, that is going to help us regain our cognition, come up with our boundaries, and not drown in blame.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's plenty. I mean, I talk a lot about the toxic emotion of shame and how shame creates
Yeah.
blame, creates regret, creates all these different negative emotions. Don't be ashamed of having to establish boundaries.
Yeah.
You know,
Well, shame is a sociological emotion in that it keeps us connected to people. We don't want that feeling that we're going to get shut out from the group. It really serves a biological purpose. If we can just embrace that, of course, we feel shame when we think we're going to disconnect from people because we're not good enough or they're not going to want us. We can then flip the script and say, what is my vision around this? Oh, I really want to connect.
yeah, there you go. And we're going right back to the voice and turning that 360, giving it a full circle
Let's
around.
go
I
back
love
to
it.
your vision. Yep.
I want to, before we kind of wrap up today, you know, we talk about a little bit about boundaries, conflict resolution. This is one of those times that I hate that I cut down to 30 minutes, but you've already committed. I've got it on recording. You have committed to come back and talking with us some more. So tell me a message of hope that you want to share with somebody who's out there that feels stuck in conflict or in an issue.
I really appreciate that question because we all do need reminders that our perspective can change in an instant and we can learn, we can connect, and just to eat for someone just to even say, I'm learning about this. You're not going to be perfect, right? There's a lot to learn, but just to say, I want to learn more. You'll be flooded with information and resources. I'd love for folks to connect with me and just love to help people learn to take a step back from their conflict. But there are lots of resources out there, Matt. And just for people to recognize that we learn something new all the time. And this is absolutely doable for anyone to learn how to be less reactive and more responsible.
I am going to highly encourage. So Amy is a co-founder of the Center for Family Resolution. You can find her through that website. Amy, do you want to give out an email or any social media handles for people to find you?
Sure. I have a TikTok channel for folks that are going through high conflict co-parenting, and that's Amy Armstrong Conflict Free. And I'm on LinkedIn. I love LinkedIn, which is Amy Armstrong Coach. And yeah, at my website, the Center for Family Resolution.
Yeah. And as a two-time co-parenter, and I say two-time, I had 4 kids that I co-parented 2 times with 2 exes. So I have a lot of good practice. I'm not going to say skill.
Beautiful. That's it. That's intense. We love our kids so much. And
oh yeah,
that's really tough when you've got conflict around parenting.
Amy, I want to tell you, I appreciate it so much. I have gained so much just from our time, and for sharing your wisdom, giving our listeners some great insight. We got people in Germany listening and in Romania too. You know, we're still in the top 100 podcasts in those 2 areas. So
beautiful.
Hopefully maybe we can end some conflict in the Middle East and then over in Europe. Maybe
I am working on a program overseas right now. So hopefully by the next time I'm on your show, I'll have an announcement for you.
Perfect. Well, we'll look forward to it. We'll try and get you back here within the next couple of weeks.
Okay.
I appreciate it so much. Remember, everyone, conflict is an opportunity. If you handle it the right way, you can get more out of it than you'd ever dream possible. And if you found today's episode helpful, subscribe, leave a comment, share your thoughts. Remember to check out Amy's work on the Center for Family Resolution for more incredible resources. Thanks for joining me on the Matt Largent Concert, where we're not just talking leadership, we're living it.
That. He's gone.